What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Today, we're going to go dive deep into the Karen Reed case. This is a case that a lot of people kind of talked me into talking about. It wasn't one that I necessarily thought I would be talking about, but hey, here we are. Her trial was ended in a hung jury not too long ago, and I think she has one slated for sometime like in April or May or something like that. I think it was scheduled for January, and it's been pushed back. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Please hit that like, please hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You know what to do. Um, and I want to say thank you to all my mods and members and subscribers in the building. We appreciate you guys. And so, like I said, I've been asked about the Karen Reed case quite a bit. If I look into it, if why I don't look into it. So I have. I've gotten into some of it. I know I've been kind of teasing the fact that we're going to talk about Karen Reed's case and John O'Keefe, who's the real victim in this case. We're going to talk about it. So today, what we're going to go over is just the timeline of things. And I don't even think we're going to get, which is why I made it for put it as part one, because I don't think we're going to get through a lot of it. And so I kind of put something together. I haven't really watched the entire trial yet, so we'll be kind of going through this along together. I've seen quite a bit of the evidence that's out there, the information that's out there. I haven't really watched the trial too much, the one that already has happened. I think I've seen some of Chris Albert's testimony, the ME's testimony. I've seen the pathologist for the defense's testimony on the injuries, and probably about it. Everything else I just kind of looked into who these people are, et cetera, et cetera. So for those that aren't familiar with the Karen Reed case, we're going to learn about it together. So here we go. Karen Reed case. Karen was arrested on February 1st, 2022. She was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision, causing the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Reed pleaded not guilty. The Karen Reed murder trial that got underway on April 16th in Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham, and I might pronounce these things wrong. Dedham, Massachusetts, which ended 8 weeks later. On July 1st, Judge Beverly Cannon declared the case a mistrial after or due to a hung jury. And so that's kind of the premises here of what we'll be talking about. And so at first we want to talk about, who is who, right? So the victim is John O'Keefe. He was born December 8th, 1975, grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts, and graduated from Braintree High School. He attended Northern Eastern University. He also earned a master's degree in criminal justice from UMass Lowell, and lived in Canton since 2014 until he passed, where he was also raising his niece and nephew following his sister and brother-in-law's death. So there was quite a bit of tragedy that occurred in John O'Keefe's life. As far as his family members go, he's lost, the O'Keefe family has lost a lot of family members. It's pretty sad. Prayers and thoughts are with them and their family, and especially the niece and nephew as well, who are now without their parents and now without their uncle. O'Keefe was a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department. John O'Keefe's partner was Pat Rogers. His girlfriend was Laura Sullivan, who had a child with him, was also longtime friends with John. These people are individuals that we're going to talk about later. They met Karen during a trip to Aruba and testified as witnesses for the Commonwealth. The accused is Karen Reed. She's born 1980, grew up in Taunton, Massachusetts, and also in Blacksburg, Virginia. She graduated from Coyle and Cassidy, a private Catholic school in Taunton. She then attended Bentley University, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in finance. She had been a financial analyst at Fidelity Investments since 2007 and was an adjustment professor at Bentley University. Reed lived in Mansfield at the time of O'Keefe's death. O'Keefe and Reed began dating back in 2020. Now, I know a lot of people are going to jump to, hey, why does it say witness? It should say this, should say that. These guys were witnesses in the case. And again, we're going to go through the timeline. I'm just kind of talking about the main players right now that are in this case. When I go through the timeline, I'm not going one way or another for the most part. I mean, I'm going to have my comments and dialogue in between, but for the most part, after I do the timeline, I'm probably going to do a part 2 of this timeline, and then we're going to go in depth into other things, like, for instance, the injuries. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about the accident itself and how it could have possibly have happened. If you guys are members, you guys can go check out the Discord. Me and my mods have had, and the members have had a interesting conversation over the last few weeks about, how the crash occurred and how it was possible for some of those injuries to have happened. And then we're also going to talk about the defense's strategy and what they said, and if there was any truth to what they said. And so we're going to do it in pieces. I don't want to don't get mad if I'm not jumping around and answering questions about things that we're going to discuss in later shows. So I just wanted to throw that out there right now. So main witness here, who was out there, maybe not necessarily a witness to the accident or the murder itself, but he was a witness on the stand, and that is Brian Albert. He was the owner of the Canton home, outside of where O'Keefe would be found deceased. That was his home, and at the time, he was a Boston police sergeant assigned to the BPD fugitive unit until his retirement on September 4, 2023. He has a brother, Kevin Albert, who we'll talk about a little bit later, but he was also a Canton Police Department detective at one point. He got suspended for drinking on the job, I believe, something that had nothing to do with the Karen Reed case, but sometimes it gets brought up for some reason. I went in and looked at why he was arrested. And so no crash occurred. Oh, there was we'll see. All right, witness. We have Chris Albert. He was a current member of the Canton Board of the Selectmen and owned D&E Pizzeria in Canton. He is the brother of retired Boston police officer Brian Albert as well. And so here at the bottom, you can see I got a picture of his shop. This is Chris Albert. We have Jen McCabe, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, and one of the persons Karen Reed to call to help locate John O'Keefe, and Nicole Albert, who is Brian's wife and also the sister for Jen McCabe. Brian Higgins, he was a special agent, or is a special agent. I'm not actually sure what he is actually doing right now. But at the time, he was a special agent for the ATF. At one time, at the time of John O'Keefe's death, he's also a very close friend of the Alberts and was very friendly with Karen Reed. We have Colin Albert, and yeah, I got other pictures that we're going to go and look at. We're going to go look at the knuckles and stuff like that, so don't get too far ahead. We have Colin Albert. Colin Albert is the son of Canton Select Board member Chris Albert and his wife Julie Albert. He's the nephew of Brian Albert. Okay. And so we also have Laura and Marietta Sullivan. Laura Sullivan is a longtime friend of John O'Keefe's. Laura and her sister Marietta Sullivan attended a 70-person group trip to Aruba. We have Paul O'Keefe. This is John O'Keefe's brother, and he believes that Karen Reed is guilty. And here's a picture of both Paul O'Keefe with his brother. A lot of people attack this guy. I don't think it's very fair. Whether you disagree with him or not, his brother passed. To add insult to injury on top of that, like, regardless of how you feel about the case, whether you think she did it or didn't do it or whatever the case may be, you can respect the family. People don't have to be jerks about things. We also have lead investigator Michael Proctor. He was a Massachusetts State Police trooper in detective unit at the time and lead investigator for the Karen Reed case. This is where everything happened. 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. All right, so let's get into this timeline. All right. So March 2020, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe reconnect after briefly. They met in 2004, and then they began dating in 2020 or something like that. That's what I could find. Maybe it was 2004 was quite a long time ago. But then again, that would have been like around. Yeah, I guess so. I guess you can meet somebody around that time and be in college, or in high school. I'm not sure where they were when they met, but they met quite a long time ago, and they ended up meeting again back in March of 2020. December 30th, 2021. Karen Reed and John O'Keefe are one of approximately 70 person group trip to Aruba. They arrive at the hotel on December 30th, 2021. Part of the group goes to dinner at the Screaming Eagle, and Reed secretly pays for the dinner bill before it arrives. The next day, on the 31st, between 9:30 and 10 p.m., Laura and Marietta Sullivan and their mother arrive back at the hotel from dinner. Marietta Sullivan goes up to their room with their mother, and Laura Sullivan goes out to the pool bar where O'Keefe is watching the Alabama football game. Sometime between 10 and 10:30 p.m., O'Keefe leaves the pool bar and goes inside the hotel lobby where he meets Marietta Sullivan coming out of the elevator. According to Sullivan, O'Keefe drunkenly bumps into and leans on her, and she points to him toward his hotel room. As he's walking away, Reed comes into the lobby and shouts, "Who the blank was that?" O'Keefe tells her Sullivan is the younger sister of a friend, and Sullivan introduces herself. Reed again swears at her, which Sullivan begins to shout back and leaves. Reed and O'Keefe began to argue for about 20 minutes about the incident in their hotel room in front of O'Keefe's niece and nephew. January 2nd, 2022, the group rents a set of cabanas on a private island owned by the hotel for a day. When O'Keefe and Reed do not show up by about 10 a.m., Laura Sullivan texts him to ask if he's coming. He tells her Reed thinks he kissed Marietta Sullivan. Laura Sullivan asks her sister if this is true, and she says it's not. O'Keefe, Reed, and his niece and nephew eventually arrive to meet the group, but there is no more discussion of the incident. January 5th, Laura Sullivan says she sees O'Keefe for the last time before he and Reed leave the Aruba trip early. So, they've been having some problems on this trip from what it sounds like. It seems like there's some accusations that are going back and forth. There's one thing that I'm sure a lot of us probably have heard and, seen in real life, but that sometimes those that are the accusators or accusers of things, especially when it comes to infidelity, sometimes they end up being the persons that are actually doing the things that they're accusing people of doing. And so I just wanted to put that out there that right now it does kind of seem like there's a little bit of jealousy enough that they decide to leave the trip early. So just something that I thought of when I'm going through this. So Keith thanks Sullivan for organizing the trip and says he wants to join again the following year once everyone has arrived home in Massachusetts. She texts him and asks him if he's interested in joining the trip again the following year, and he tells her, "Let me recover from this trip first." So from the time that O'Keefe left and he said, "Thank you, I want to do this again next year," to the time that when, everybody had arrived home in Massachusetts and she texts her about it again next year, he's like, "I got to recover from this." So something happened during that time, and I think it was just an extension of why they ended up leaving the trip early. And it doesn't sound like there's it sounds like this relationship is in turmoil. January 12th, 2022, 8:23 a.m., Reed texts Brian Higgins, an alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosive agent, for the first time after getting his cell phone number from a friend. Between January 12th and 23rd, Reed and Higgins exchanged texts on 9 separate days. Their final text of communication is before the night of O'Keefe's death on January 23rd. So she was still in a relationship. It's been pretty rocky. They're having problems already. She's accusing him of kissing another person. She starts texting another man. You can see this is one thing that I think is important, and we're probably going to discuss it more in depth later, but there's the behavioral elements of a crime or for a criminal, right? You have three elements. You have before the crime, during the crime, and after the crime, right? The actions that can be incriminating to a defendant. And I'm very familiar with the Brian Koberger case, so I'll utilize that one, for instance, to explain. Pre-crime, for Brian Koberger he was driving around, the victim's houses before the murders happened, right? He was buying things like a jumpsuit days before. He had purchased a K-bar knife, things like that. So that was the pre behaviors, right? That element. During the time of the crime, he was out and about, per his own, statements. He was out and about by himself. His phone was off during the murders. There's a lot of incriminating behaviors there. And then post, you have him wearing gloves, taking out his trash to the neighbor's house. There's a lot of incriminating pre, middle, or during, and after. And so far in this situation, I do see some evidence that potentially can say that there's something leading up here. Could be building. All righty. So January 15th, Higgins goes to O'Keefe's home for a party to watch a New England Patriots game. As he's leaving, him and Reed kiss. Between January 15th and the 23rd, Reed goes to Brian Higgins' home. Higgins testified that they had one drink and discussed whether they wanted a relationship, but did not kiss or have any other intimate contact. I kind of call BS on that one. I don't think it's going to look good if Reed accuses him of them being sexually active during this moment. It doesn't look good for her because she's cheating on her, could be or would be, or his would be deceased ex-boyfriend here. So that would be a really bad blow to her. It also would be a big blow to Higgins if he were to have admitted that they had some sort of sexual relationship. Nobody's said that there was that, but given the context, they've already made a move on each other. Now she's going to his house. It sounds like drinks are involved quite a bit in everything that we're reading on everybody's end. We'll come to find out that that's pretty common amongst everybody. Yeah, I doubt it. Now, a lot of people look at, hey, Brian Higgins, maybe he committed this crime because he was, he liked Karen Reed or whatever the case may be. Maybe. I mean, there's also been a lot of people who have cheated and decided to take the life of their significant other because they can't handle the thought of breaking up or whatever. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case here, but there are both sides of the coin to that. January 28th at 9:49 a.m., Reed texts O'Keefe, "You have really hurt me on this time." After they had an argument that morning. I mean, she's the one that's kissing dudes and going to their house. Yeah, I mean, it just I think there's a little bit of I'm the victim in everything so far that I've seen. And I'll be honest, I put 40 some odd slides together, so I see something like that. So let's continue. At 1:47 p.m., O'Keefe texts Reed to ask what time she is coming to visit him that day. Also, between then, there was other text messages, and we'll go into those more in depth. I'm going to go into a lot more of in-depth things when it comes to we get to the specific parts, but we are going to look at Karen Reed's exact text messages and stuff. But throughout this day, she actually told John O'Keefe that, during their argument that she was going to go out and get a drink, and that was around 2:00. Or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, and that her first alcoholic beverage was way earlier in the day. And I think he even mentioned to her, why do you have to announce that you're going to go out there and have a drink? And so I was like, so to me, It's showing a little bit of like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit of a passive aggressive comment from him. No, no, not really. It's a very aggressive comment saying, all right, I'm going to go have a drink. Blah, blah, blah. We're fighting. And it's more of like a retaliation type of thing. Maybe that's not the right word, but um, kind of just like, all right, you want to go out there and you want to argue. So I'm going to go out and have a drink. All right. So they have that argument earlier throughout the day. At 1:47, O'Keefe texts Reed to ask what time she's coming to visit him that day. She says she doesn't know. She is still upset about their argument that morning. She asks him to tell her if he is interested in someone else. Again, this is another situation where she's already met another guy. She's gone to his house. She's had an intimate moment with him, whether it's just a kiss or more. And now she's, basically asking if he's interested in somebody else. Kind of turning the whole thing into, hey, I'm the victim here again. This kind of seems like a common reoccurrence as I'm going through the timelines of what things are happening and things of that nature. And again, don't for those that think she's innocent, I am going to go through the information that the defense has as well. But these are just my observations and thoughts as we're going through here. She calls him repeatedly over the course of the afternoon, but he doesn't answer. It's a little controlling, telling her over text that he is busy with his family. She didn't want to go hang out with the family. So you can see this argument going back and forth. You know what I mean? Tit for tat type of thing. It's really stirring, though, the pot when it comes to once you get alcohol involved. He invites her to come over, but she says she doesn't want to be around his family. So this is the reason why he's probably not answering, like I mentioned before. At 3 p.m., O'Keefe calls Reed back. So that evening, Brian Albert, Kevin Albert, Brian Higgins, and Eddie Hernandez arrived back in Massachusetts from New York City, where they were attending a funeral of an officer killed in the line of duty. Albert and Higgins go to the Hillside pub to have a drink. Albert leaves about 15 minutes before Higgins and invites him to come to the waterfall, which Higgins accepts. So they've already decided to go to the waterfall, and they're going to be there. It seems like their decision to go to the waterfall was made before, I'm assuming, John O'Keefe's decision to go there, right? I think they were already there when he arrived, and we're going to find that out, in the timeline. O'Keefe goes with his nephew to D&E Pizzeria, owned by Chris Albert. This is the brother of Brian Albert. Albert tells O'Keefe that he planned to go to the waterfall that night with family and friends and invites O'Keefe to come. So it definitely does sound like Brian Albert knew at least some of the people that were there. I mean, he's getting invited by the brother of the officers whose house was where his body was located. So, I mean, I don't see where they're going to come up with this or how they lead this master plan of like, we're going to take his life. Was it, if there was some sort of master plan, or was it just kind of by luck that he ended up going to the same place they were kind of situation? I don't think so. It seems like they were invited by various people throughout the folks that are, I don't want to say involved, but those that were witnesses or involved in the case, not necessarily involved in the murder. That's not what I'm trying to say. So he gets invited out there. At 6:44, O'Keefe texts Reed, says that his nephew left to go to a friend's house and that his niece is with a friend. He tells her that he and Michael Camerano are going out to C.F. McCarthy's and invites her to come. Reed texts O'Keefe and tells him she is having an issue with the water heater and has asked the plumber who lives down the street to come take a look. He tells her not to have someone come now and to come and meet him in writing. Hope your plumber buddy that you texted is hot, and saying he would look at it for her, but she decides to wait for the plumber anyways. So she'd been drinking too throughout that day, from what it sounded like. And she's inviting other men into the house. She's having a water heater problem, but obviously they're going through some trust issues. They're going through some things. He's saying he'll fix it. I don't know if he's the guy maybe he's the type of guy that'll say he'll do something and don't do it. Um, my wife will accuse me of that. Uh, and I mean, I eventually do it. Well, anyways, so right here, so it just seems kind of almost like, like I said, tit for tat. O'Keefe and Michael Camerano arrive at C.F. McCartney's to celebrate O'Keefe's niece and Camerano's daughter, who are friends, being accepted into the Bishop Feehan High School. Kurt Roberts leaves to meet O'Keefe and Michael Camerano at C.F. McCartney's at 8:30 p.m. At 8:35, Reed texts O'Keefe that she is on her way to meet him from her home in Mansfield. Now, I'm also going to go through some maps and things of that nature. And so it'll be, like I said, this is just the timeline. I'm going to have probably quite a few videos on this. All right. 8:51, Karen Reed arrives at C.F. McCartney's. She receives her first drink at 8:58 and drinks at 9:15, 9:33, 9:57, and at 10:29. So she's that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drinks in a matter of an hour and a half. Yeah, that'll get you going. That's for sure. Brian Higgins and Jen and Matt McCabe and other friends arrive at the waterfall. At 10:30 p.m., Kurt Roberts comes home from C.F. McCartney's. Sometime between 10:30 and 11 p.m., Colin Albert arrives at 34 Fairview Road to celebrate Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday, which is the son of who is now the retired detective Brian Albert, who owns the home at that address. At 10:54 p.m., O'Keefe and Reed arrive at the waterfall. Brian Higgins sends a flirty text to Reed while they're both in the bar, but she does not reply. Shortly after they arrive, Julia Albert leaves because she has migraine. So he sends her a text. They haven't talked in a minute, but he sends her a text message. It's a flirty text. It's not like, what the hell are you doing with that guy? You should be here with me or whatever. It doesn't sound like it's an aggressive text. It's a flirty text. I want to see what it is. I haven't seen that yet. I know I'm getting, like I said, I've been working on this, but I can only do so much. This case wasn't tried in a day, right? It wasn't tried in an hour and a half. It was quite some time. So we're going to go at this piece by piece, so that way we understand everything. I know there's a lot of people that are trying to, say one thing or another in the live chat, like, oh, hey, this didn't happen or that didn't happen. Or how did this happen? We're going to talk about all those things, the tail light, everything, the crash, 9 yards. Truth be told, I've investigated quite a few accidents. I've also testified in court about how accidents occur for a law firm after my law enforcement career. So take that for what it is. We'll discuss it, and we'll talk about all those things at that point. All righty. So he texts her the flirty message shortly after so we got there. So at 11:54, Colin Albert texts Allison McCabe and asks for a ride home from 34 Fairview Road. McCabe had been driving around Canton with her friends and drops them off before going to pick them up. So he's already planning on leaving and stuff, right? So they had that already planned. It was intended. Okay. On January 29th. So this is going into the next morning, and it just goes from 11:50 to 12 a.m., right? So at 12 a.m., Brian and Nicole Albert, Jennifer and Matt McCabe, and Brian Higgins leave the waterfall. They decide to go. Julie Nagel calls her brother Ryan and asks for a ride home from 34 Fairview Road. At 12:10 a.m., Allison McCabe arrives at 34 Fairview Road to pick up Colin Albert. Albert says goodbye to Brian and Nicole Albert as they are arriving home. Did he go back at any point? Because I know there's a lot of people that talk about him like, oh, he had some bloody knuckles or something like that. But if he has proof that he left there, and then there's other people that can corroborate that he left from there, How was he also back there when he can't? Okay. All right. That's one thing I don't think happens. Oh, I don't think she wanted Higgins. She went to his house. She went to his house. I mean, you guys can look at one thing from one perspective or another. I'm not trying to single anybody out, but in reality, nobody knows who these people are. Only the people that are there. Like none of y'all met. I mean, maybe there's one mod that may have met somebody that was here, that one of the persons involved or knows them. But for like 99.999% of everybody else, they don't know them. They don't know what they think. They don't know what any of these people do. They don't know what they are, what type of person they are when no one's looking. You don't know. They had flirty messages. She messaged back and forth with him. She kissed him. I don't know where this I think that there wasn't anything there type of situation. It don't sound like it. Just because they testify that nothing sexual happened at their home, as I mentioned before, doesn't mean that that's the case. It would look bad on both parties if they were to admit that. Now, should that be something they admit? They're under oath. One's an officer, probably, and yes. But in real life situation, I probably would think, they're probably not going to admit to that. It don't make either side of them look good. But yeah, so Colin Albert leaves at 12:10, and this is recorded because Allison McCabe arrives there to pick him up. Albert says goodbye to Brian and Nicole Albert as they were arriving home. Reed then leaves the waterfall. At 12:11 a.m., John O'Keefe leaves the waterfall carrying a cocktail glass. Between 12:11 and 12:21 a.m., O'Keefe's cell phone records have him taking 170 steps and traveling 326 feet in this time period. At 12:12 a.m., the location data on his phone shows him at the waterfall. So it sounds like at one point Reed may have left without him. I'm not sure. We'll go through the video and the footage later. We're going to do this one piece at a time, remember. At 12:14 a.m., O'Keefe texts Jen McCabe to ask her where to go, and she texts him. The address is 34 Fairview Road. She calls him and gives him directions to the house. So, I know that there's a lot of people who think that there's some sort of conspiracy here. And I'm just thinking that in order for that to be some sort of conspiracy and all this other things, all these people were in on this. They were like, hey, let's just tell them to go there. And even though we're officers and there's going to be a lot of evidence of us telling them to come here, and we're still going to do this. That I don't mean to sound harsh or anything, but these are one guy's a seasoned detective. I don't know. But yeah, Karen Reed and they left together. Maybe. Oh no, I'm not talking about those steps yet. These are the steps out there at the waterfall. All right. So at 12:15, a car consistent with Karen Reed's SUV is seen on surveillance footage driving past Canton Town Library. 2 minutes later, it's seen driving past Temple Beth Abraham. At 12:18, O'Keefe calls Jen McCabe to ask for more specific directions to 34 Fairview Road. 12:15 to 12:30 a.m., Ryan and Nagel, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing this name right. His girlfriend, Heather Maxon, and other friends arrived to pick up Julie from the Alberts home. Ryan sees a black SUV pull up to the same house and sees a woman in the driver's seat with the interior light on. Maxon sees the woman as well as a man in the passenger seat. None of the three people in the car noticed any damage to the SUV or see anyone get out. Brian Albert Jr. looks out the window when he sees Ryan arrive and sees a dark SUV outside of the house. He does not see any body, or he doesn't see a body on the lawn, which I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh man, There's a body out there. How could you not see it going in and out? It's dark. Where the body was located was pretty far end of the property near the fire hydrant. But it was cold and snowing. I don't understand why anybody would have gone, that far to drop somebody off. However, and I'll explain why I think somebody did, which would have been Karen Reed. Drop somebody that far off. Everybody getting dropped off, everybody getting picked up is probably closer to the driveway, which is, and I can't go back on this, but which is like on the other side of the front part of the property. So it's like on two opposite ends of the same side, right? Um, so I mean, I don't know. You're looking in one direction. It's dark. We saw pictures of John O'Keefe next to his brother. They don't appear to be like fat men that are going to be bulging out of the ground there. And if there's some snow around him and things, and if he's wearing darker clothing, which it appeared that he was, it's going to be very difficult to see him. I, as a former police officer, have had a situation where I missed the body myself at night. That was on the ground, and going around, I ended up finding it. But if it was, yeah, and I missed it. There's nothing else I can say about it. I mean, it happens quite a bit, to be honest with you. I mean, we've investigated a lot of other crimes where people are looking for individuals. Like, for instance, there's the Vanessa Guillen case out of Fort Hood, where her her life was taken inside of a one of the armories at the military base by a man who convinced him and his girlfriend to that she was coming on to him, and they ended up taking her life with a hammer, and they disassembled her body, put it into a trash can, and they took it out into the middle of nowhere. They buried it, they burned it, they went back, they took it out, they moved it to another place and buried it. Officers found out where their location was due to their phone activity, and they went to the specific locations and had search parties physically searching for anything in the area, and they never found anything. It was 3 weeks later when a road crew ended up discovering some of the remains, and it was not too far off the road. It was a little bit further north than what they were looking for, but they were in the right area. They were looking for something. So, for it to be that late at night, people are typically not paying attention to their entire surroundings like that, especially when they're hanging out with their friends or they're going out. Which is why, like, a lot of times, people tell people to be careful because you never know who's watching you, or any of those things. And most people don't know. They're naive to their surroundings, especially when there's friends around. They'll be talking to them. They're hanging out. There's the phone is a big issue nowadays as well. A lot of people are too busy looking down. And so to expect somebody to see a body wearing dark clothing in the lawn, that's on the opposite end in the dark area where there's a fire hydrant at the where the properties meet, is I think it's the expectation there's a little bit high. But just wanted to explain that. So yeah, I mean, if you back out, your driveway and your headlights hit the yard, are you looking forward or are you looking backward to make sure you're not hitting anybody? So I think one person may have seen something. I think we're going to talk about that here. So 5 minutes later, Julie comes outside to speak with them, but decides to stay and gets her ride home later. Julie invites them to come in. Oh no, hold on. I think I made a mistake. So let me go back real quick. I can't. That's one thing about these I can't go back on. Right. All right. So yeah, we were there. All righty. All right. So 5 minutes later, Julie comes outside to speak with him, and but decides to stay. Gets her ride later. She invites him to come in, but Maxon decides that they don't want to because it's late. As she goes back inside, Ryan sees the SUV move forward as they leave, Maxon sees only the woman inside of the SUV at this time. Julie sees the SUV from the window before she goes outside to speak with her brother, but by the time she goes outside, the SUV is gone. At 12:12 a.m., Colin Albert arrives home and says goodnight to his parents. Chris and Juliet Albert, Jen and Matthew McCabe arrive at the 34 Fairview Road. Brian Higgins texts John O'Keefe at this point, "Where are you at?" O'Keefe's cell phone location data shows him on Dedham Street. The address of 34 Fairview Road is entered into the Waves navigation app. When they reach Cedar Crest Road, Reed, who is driving, goes past Fairview Road, does a 3-point turn, and turns onto Fairview. At 12:24, O'Keefe and Reed arrive back at 34 Fairview Road, according to the location data from O'Keefe's cell phone. And at approximately, so they didn't even get there until 12:30 or 12:24. And at this point, Colin's already at his mom and dad's house. So O'Keefe's cell phone at approximately 12:25 a.m. And at that point, O'Keefe's cell phone does not record any movement, doesn't record going into the house, doesn't record going anywhere else. It stays there at that location. At 12:27, Jen McCabe texts O'Keefe here. So they're still trying to find him. They're still, texting him, trying to locate him. These are, maybe not locating him, but trying to tell him like, hey, we're here, because they're expecting him to be there. Yeah. That's a lot of people involved in a crime like this, and nobody. They would have to be involved. Like, it would have to be a lot, but we'll go into it a lot later. She texts him again and says, "Pull up behind me." She sends 3 more text messages at 12:40, 12:42, and 12:45 a.m. She testified that when she sent each of the 5 text messages, she walked to the door and looked out at the front of the house where she could see Karen Reed's SUV parked. She said the SUV moved up further the street 3 times, and the last time she checked, it was gone. 12:30 a.m., Allison McCabe arrives home and sees that her parents, Jen and Matt McCabe, are not home yet. She goes to sleep. Between 12:30 and 1 a.m., Brian Higgins leaves 34 Fairview Road, drives to the Canton Police Department. According to Higgins' testimony, he moves his government pickup truck and his surveillance vehicle into the center of the lot to make it easier to plow. Then he drives home. Well, most police departments have cameras around it, surveillance, right? And so there's probably a good timestamp of when he arrived there based on that. I got to look for it. I haven't found it, but it wouldn't be that difficult if he's claiming that he left Fairview Road and went straight there. How long that would have taken him to see when he left. If he left at 12:30 and then he's getting home at 1 a.m. So, he leaves at 12:30, he goes to the Canton Police Department, moves everything, and then he goes home and he gets there at 1 a.m. That's only giving this entire scenario like 5 minutes to commence. This fight with a dog and also take his life and then go stage the scene. That's possible, I guess, but I'm pretty sure we would see some more evidence about that. But, he never goes into the house. 12:36 a.m., Reed's cell phone automatically connects to the Wi-Fi at O'Keefe's house. She calls O'Keefe, the first of more than 50 calls she makes to him between this time and 6:08 a.m. Based on her actions, I do think that maybe she wasn't completely sure, if she did hit him, that she wasn't completely sure that she struck him. I don't think so. Because some of the actions that she's saying now, that kind of leaves out the, intent portion of it. But I'm not sure yet. I want to see more of the evidence, but, and just her actions of, calling and leaving voicemails and stuff like that. That's not an indication that she's completely innocent at all either. I want to see more of the evidence, but, this is probably the first thing that I've seen that might make me say, all right, she's acting more like somebody who's not sure if she did do it. Because she did think that there was that possibility. She does say, according to the defense, that, when she's out there's like, did I hit him? Which is an odd thing to say, you know? It's an odd thing to come out there and say, like, oh my God, he's here in the lawn. Did I hit him? He's far away from the street. Did I hit him? Like, that's an odd thing to say. You have to admit that's an odd thing to say. That's a very suspicious comment, in my opinion. I would have jumped all over that. So Reed leaves a voicemail for O'Keefe saying, John, I effing or blank hate you. So again, there's a lot of hatred here. And which kind of tells me, like, I know we haven't gotten there yet, and we will, but where his body was located and the injuries, I'm going to talk about those and what they're consistent with and things of that nature. But to me, it felt like she would have had to have dropped him off kind of far away. And, it sounds like they were upset, especially, with what she was leaving behind. And there's a good chance that, that, he could have, she could have dropped him off, in the argument, dropped him off kind of far. He yells out something at her as she's leaving. She goes in reverse, like, what did you say, in an angry manner? Maybe doesn't even try to hit him, but like swerves to try to get closer, swerves and sideswipes him, and he ends up falling into the yard. And she doesn't know whether or not, he jumped or she hit him or whatever. She was, from the sound of it, kind of intoxicated. So she may not even have known she hit him completely, but may have had the idea, because for somebody to go in there and say, did I do this? That's a weird thing to say. When I was in law enforcement, it's very similar to when you go into a scene, right? And one person goes, I didn't hit nobody. Like, well, who did you hit? Like, well, nobody's accusing you of hitting anybody. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Well, maybe you don't. I mean, if you guys weren't ever in law enforcement, but those are what we call triggers, clues, and statements that point you into a direction of possibility. Somebody saying that, did I hit him? Even if that's the question, in my opinion, it's a very suspicious comment. That's for sure. Why don't I just stick to law enforcement testimony? Because I'm not in law enforcement anymore. It's been a long time. I've been in my current employment, been doing what I've been doing for a lot longer than I was an officer. It was a very brief time. And what I'm doing is just going through the timeline here. I am going to go through the defensive stuff. I'm not going we're going to go see their point of view. And I may even ask a couple of the mods or the Discord members if they want to come up and discuss the defense's side of things, in a future show. Obviously not tonight, but in a future show I do. All right, at 12:41 a.m., according to notes made by Proctor while reviewing ring video from O'Keefe's home, taillights are seen in the driveway, which he said may have been Reed arriving home. This video clip is later found to be missing, and Proctor does not make a note for the clip in a report he wrote about the footage. Okay. So, I mean, he's claiming that that at 12:41 on Karen Reed's ring device, that's what says when she's arriving home. I'm assuming that means that these other phone calls where she leaves the voicemails and stuff was as she, I guess, left. But all right, at 12:55 a.m., Reed texts O'Keefe, "I'm going home." She texts that his niece and nephew are home alone. 12:59, Reed leaves a voicemail for O'Keefe saying, "John, I'm here with your blank kids. Nobody knows where the blank you are, you blank pervert." Sounds like she's a real winner in this relationship. Like she's a real keeper. Man, it's She had just dropped him off. You know what I mean? Like, why is she like so concerned? Was she expecting him to be back like 10 minutes later? So this is a little bit suspicious for me too. Because it was what, 12:24, 12:25 when they arrived. By 12:59, or maybe even earlier. Let's see, when was the first one? It was like, where are you? Um, let's see. So it's 12:36, so that's about 10 minutes after the fact. And this is when she gets to his house. So it shouldn't be that hard to determine how long it took for her to have left um, the address there on Fairview Road and get to O'Keefe's house. We'll be able to do that when we go through the maps and stuff. But she drops him off, and then within let's see, 12:55. So within 20 minutes, because he's not home, and let's just see if she left there at the right time at 12:25, and she went directly to his place, and it was at 12:36. So it's an 11-minute drive. And so she's expecting him home or have left by 12:55 because she's leaving, or she's arriving to his home at 12:41. Um, how late did she expect him to stay before she started questioning where he was? This kind of seems a little premature as far as where are you, blah 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 blah. Um, why would she have any indication that something bad had happened if she had just dropped him off? Interesting. 12:59 relays a voicemail for O'Keefe saying, "John, I'm here with your blanking kids. Nobody knows where the blank you are, you blank pervert." 11 a.m. 1:11 a.m. Reed leaves a voicemail for Keefe saying, "It's 1 in the morning. I'm with your blank niece and nephew. You blank pervert. You're a blank pervert." 1:18 a.m. Reed leaves a voicemail for O'Keefe telling him she's going home and accusing him of being with another woman. She calls him a blank pervert. Hmm. At 1:30, between 1:30 and or 1:30 to 1:45, Jen, Matt, and McCabe and Julie and Sarah Livingston leave 34 Fairview Road. Nangle sees a black blob on the front lawn as they drive away, and it says so. Levinson asks what it was, and she says she doesn't know. So at this point, they're kind of saying that maybe somebody did see something out there. Now, if something had happened and he was already placed out there, this is an interesting, thing to make up. You know what I'm saying? Like, why even say you saw anything? Just say you didn't see anything. But to say you saw something that could have been the deceased, why bring that up if you're trying to cover something? That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't jive. 1:45 to 2 a.m. Caitlin Albert leaves the 34 Fairview Road when her boyfriend, Tristan Morris, arrives to pick her up. She sees the last guest to leave. Albert testified that she did not see a body or anything else on the lawn as she was leaving. But by this time, the snow started to accumulate. And again, especially if there's icy conditions, are you really looking around and into this to the yard? Or are you looking where you're walking to ensure that you don't slip? I don't know. 2:12 a.m. Brian Higgins receives a 1-second call from Brian Albert, and 17 seconds later, he calls Albert back with the second call lasting 22 seconds. Higgins denied making these calls or speaking with Albert at this time. Both men said that these calls were butt dials. Now, what could you get at 2:22 a.m.? What do you this is the theory, right? Like they called each other for a short amount of time. How do you connect that dot to they murdered somebody? Like what can possibly be an outcome of a call that doesn't get answered? and then a call back that only lasts 22 seconds. I mean, what are you saying? Nobody's out there? Nobody's found him yet? And then hang up? Like I don't understand where this goes from, oh man, they must have done something. When let's be honest, I think a lot of people here have done some butt dials in their life, and especially if they were I think the story goes that the Alberts were kind of getting it on or something like that during this time. Now, if there's a butt dial, like let's think about this logically, right? So if somebody does a butt dial and they call somebody else who doesn't answer, do you think that that other person has a notification? Now, if they do have a notification, how easy is it to accidentally hit call back? I mean, I know I've done it multiple times. I know that's anecdotal or whatever, but I'm pretty sure majority of us have done that a time or two. That's what this sounds like. This really doesn't sound like anything nefarious. I don't understand the connection between a 22-second phone call at 2:22 a.m. Higgins was already home. Everybody else had already left. Like, what's the advantage of doing this? Where does it benefit Brian Higgins and Albert in this scenario? I don't know. 2:27 a.m. according to the defense, a digital investigator, Richard Green, Jen McCabe searches Hose long to die in the cold on her cell phone. McCabe has denied making the search at this time. 2 digital forensic experts who testified for the defense both determined that at 2:27, McCabe had opened up a browser tab on her phone to search for Hockomock Sports, a league where her children play in. Now, this is the defense's own witnesses. And that at the timestamp from when the tab was open, not when she made the search. That's from the defense's side. That's not from the prosecution side. They testified for the defense. I don't know. Tested for the defense. And they say that that's not what happened. And yet I hear so many people arguing that, oh, there's this search. There's this search. She has to be innocent because there's this search. And yet what they're saying is that she opened up a tab and she searched for something, but she used the same tab to search for how long does it take for somebody to die in the cold. And that search didn't come until 6 something a.m. $2:30 a.m. And text PJ, I'm really not in the mood, my man or lady. You can go back to the beginning and watch. But this is from what I've taken. I'm not going into one-sided or the other side because everything that I've done and research has been through both sides. So take that for what it is. But please go to the beginning and watch it. Go to the beginning and watch it. And yes, again, as I mentioned multiple times, I am going to talk about the defense. You'll pass. All righty. Yeah. Good luck. All righty. So at 2:30 a.m., plow driver Brian Longren punches in to begin plowing for the neighborhood around Fairview Road, according to his testimony. 2:45 a.m., Lauren drives by the 34 Fairview Road and does not see a body on the lawn, according to his testimony. Now, I'm not like, I don't live in a snowy place. I've been to a lot of snowy places. I sure have. Well, let me rephrase that. I actually was born in a very cold place and lived there, but I was raised in Texas since I was like 7, but we'll take that for what it is. Well, anyways, since then I've traveled to a lot of cold places, but I would assume that if your job is to plow the road, that you're looking at the road to make sure you're not going to hit anybody or anything. I'm not too certain about the whole, looking at 7 feet or 7 yards into the lawn to see if there's a body. And if the snowplow guy is out there, it's not because there's no snow on the ground. That's because there's a significant amount of snow. And as you've seen, and we've seen pictures of John O'Keefe, he's not a fat man. It probably didn't take very much for him to be covered. So let's see. Why type it wrong 3 times? Because they were outside, right? It's pretty cold. Have you ever tried typing in the cold? It's not. I mean, just to think that, oh, she misspelled something wrong, and that means that she's part of a murder. That's kind of far-fetched, a lot far-fetched in my opinion. All righty, so let's continue. At 3:15 to 3:30, Lauren goes by the 34 Fairview Road again and sees a Ford Edge on the side of the road in front of the house. According to his testimony, he goes around it, and even though there is a parking ban in place, he does not call his supervisor to report the car because he's being courteous of the Albert family. He said during his trial. Did a lot of people think he was in it too because he knew the Albert family? Is this where it's going? Are people going to say that, oh, the snow plow driver, man, I'm speaking wrong right now. The snow plow driver, he knows the Alberts. He's also in on it. Everybody's in on it. Yeah, 6'2", 217 is not that big of a wide person. We've seen his pictures. He's not that big of a man. Like he's not 300 pounds where, oh man, he's sticking out of the ground. You get what I'm saying? So came through after all had left. There was little snow. You don't send out a plow driver unless there's snow on the ground. And from what I understand, there was a blizzard that night. So, yeah, there was. Oh no, don't worry about Texas PJ. I already took care of them. All right, so let's continue. At 4:30 a.m., Karen Reed wakes up John O'Keefe's niece and tells her that O'Keefe did not arrive home that night before. The nieces call and text O'Keefe a cell phone with no response. 4:53 a.m., Jen McCabe receives a call from John O'Keefe's niece, who was told to call her by Karen Reed, and learns that O'Keefe did not return home the night before. After McCabe speaks briefly to the niece, he gives the phone to Reed, who decides to drive to McCabe's home. So, a lot of people say that Miss McCabe was in on it too. Was it just by chance that the person that Reed called for help was also going to stab her in the back? Like everybody is 100% against her, I guess. Like I said, I mean, I'm going to get to the defense's point of view. Not today, obviously, because the timeline's not even going to get done for today. I'm going to have to do that again on Thursday, I think. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the prosecution's argument, and then we're going to talk about the defense. Isn't that how the trial goes? And you got your opening statements. We got a timeline here. And then you got the prosecution side, the defense side, and then the closing arguments. Be calm and be patient, people. We'll get there. All righty. So let's continue. Thank you, 49er Girl, coming in with a gifted Drunk Turkey Show membership. Thank you so much. We are going to be doing a members only this weekend, probably on Sunday. So keep in mind for that. It'll be a Q&A, probably a lot about what we're talking here. 5 a.m., Karen Reed calls Carrie Roberts. She tells Roberts O'Keefe did not come home the night before and asks her to help him look for him. Roberts calls the police non-emergency line to ask if there was any plow accidents, as well as Good Samaritan Hospital, before driving to meet Reed and Jen McCabe at McCabe's home. 5:08 a.m., Karen Reed leaves John O'Keefe's home in her SUV. Ring camera footage of her backing out of the garage appears to show her bumping into O'Keefe's car, which is parked in the driveway, before driving away. Which I didn't put it on here, but I know that when they went back and looked at it, there wasn't any damage to O'Keefe's car. I could be wrong. If you guys have seen it, email me a picture of O'Keefe's car and the damage that was sustained by Karen Reed bumping into it. I would like to see that. From what I saw, I didn't see any, but I'm interested in what other people say about that. 5:11 a.m. A car consistent with Karen Reed's SUV is seen on surveillance footage driving past Canton Town Library in the direction of the waterfall. 4 minutes later, she drives back in the other direction, and another 3 minutes later, she drives past Temple Beth Abraham. By 23 a.m., Reed leaves a voicemail for O'Keefe saying, "John, where are you?" Waking up at 4 o'clock. I mean, she was texting him like 60 times and calls. It's also been reported. I don't think they're going to be able to use this in trial, but she also like messaged her mom and dad during that weird hour of the night as well. I think prosecution were going to try to use that as some sort of like, evidence if they were going to be allowed to look at Reed's past call history or her parents' call history to see if there was a pattern of calls coming in that late. That definitely would have shown if she called late at night that night out of the blue and is not something that she's done before in the past. She's had arguments with John O'Keefe in the past, and if those calls don't happen at 4, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, it is a little bit suspicious, in my opinion. I think that's another, like I mentioned, behavioral element before, during, after the crime. Doing something that you're not commonly used to doing is a big one. So let's see. Let's see. All righty. Next page. At 5:30 a.m., plow driver Brian Lauren testified that this time he returned to Fairview Drive Road, and was unable to get past the carriage lane because the road was blocked off by first responders. Prosecutors say that because there was no first responders at the scene at this time, Lauren's account of all the times that he went past Fairview Road are inaccurate. In a May 2023 interview with police, Lauren said that he punched into began plowing between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m., saw the Ford Edge between 1:30 and 2 a.m., and saw first responders blocking the road between 3 and 3:30 a.m., according to police reports. So this guy was all over the place. All the times that he said that he was there. I mean, is it possible that he drove by there or did, maybe saw some things or whatever the case may have been? Maybe, but I mean, who knows what time that was? He still can't get it right. So I don't know about that. All righty. 5:35 a.m. Karen leaves at Jen McCabe's home, and Carrie Roberts arrives soon after. The three women go to O'Keefe's home to look for him there. At O'Keefe's home, Reed shows McCabe and Roberts her broken taillight. So she already knew about her broken taillight. She was familiar with it. Now, if she pulls in, right, and she goes in and she's arguing, and then she's backing out, potentially hit something or whatever, right? That's what the claim is, right? But I don't believe there was ever any damage to his car from what I had found. There was no damage to his car. So when did she find out about the broken taillight? Part of me thought that, especially because there was a piece of glass that was found on the back bumper that didn't belong to the scene area or whatever, was did she go and still consume alcohol while she was out there? And once she got to O'Keefe's house and maybe perhaps went to go see the taillight or that scenario, during that process, her being pretty intoxicated at the time, from my understanding, it's possible she dropped another glass when she went to go look at the taillight being broken before she goes out there and picks up all these people. I wonder. I think that might explain why there's a piece of glass there that doesn't belong to the glass that O'Keefe had in his hand that night. Is it possible that she went out there to go look at the taillight? Because she's very familiar with it before she gets there. Right? She's already saying, "Hey, I have a broken tail light." Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Well, Sherry D, that I found it on multiple locations that she said this, including news reports and things of that nature. So this was, I didn't find it just in one spot. Alrighty. When they do not find O'Keefe, they drive to 34 Fairview Road. At 6:03 a.m., Reed says she sees O'Keefe outside of 34 Fairview Road and jumps out to Robert's car. Now, apparently there was like evidence that was found days later in the snow and stuff like that. It sounds like there was a good amount of snow under his body, where I've seen the pictures of where he was laying at. Um, there was a blizzard that night, and if they found, pieces in the snow, like, and that kind of tells you that there was snow on the body during that time. So, for her to like see him at that time, that location, I mean, she may have been specifically looking at that area because that was the last time where she saw him drop him off. That's where, that might be why she's looking directly there, and sees him covered under snow. It's weird. All righty. So Reed sees O'Keefe's outside of 34 Fairview Road, jumps out of Robert's car. Roberts and McCabe leave the car in the middle of the road and follow Reed to the lawn where they find O'Keefe unresponsive. Reed and Roberts begin CPR. At 6:04, McCabe calls 911. All right. 6:08 a.m., Can Police Sergeant Sean Good contacts Detective Sergeant Michael Link and asks him to go to 34 Fairview Road. Also, the reason why you guys may not have heard some of these things is because maybe perhaps some of the people you were listening to perhaps didn't bring out all the information that was out there. It's a good possibility too. I don't hide from any of the evidence or any of the things. I'm going to talk about Proctor and his behavior and all those things. And I'm going to talk about the defensive side. So I'm going to give you both sides of the coin here. But in some places, unfortunately, it's only one side of the coin that you're going to get. And when that happens, there's a lot of information that says that. I didn't say that there was footage of Karen that told that to a reporter. I said I found it in reports and in many places. Alrighty. 6:10 a.m. Canton police officer Stephen Sarauf arrives at 34 Fairview Road. He is followed by Officer Stephen Mullany and Sergeant Sean Good. 6:15, O'Keefe's cell phone records records movement for the first time since 12:25. So that entire time, there was no movement, nothing of him going inside the house or any of those things. Interesting. 6:23 a.m. McCabe searches how long to die in the cold, misspells it. 1 minute later, she searches it again, also misspells things. It is freezing out there. There's probably a lot of concern. Her friend is on the ground, deceased or appearing to be deceased, frozen. To expect somebody to not have spelling mistakes in this moment, and for the expectation of them to have perfect spelling, and thinking because they don't have perfect spelling that there's some sort of suspect, it's just kind of stupid. No offense, but that's just what it is. Like there's no correlation there between, oh, she misspelled it wrong, that means she's a criminal, she killed this person, and she was involved in the cover-up. That doesn't make any sense. And again, for those that weren't here earlier, it was Karen Reed's defense team that stated that a tab was open at 2:27 a.m. that searched some sports events. That same tab was what was used at 6 o'clock in the morning to search how long does it take to die in the cold. That was from the defense's witnesses. So if the defense is saying this, and I know Larissa is saying this, hey, it's not it's the timestamp. The defense said it was later. It was the defense's witness who said that It was the tab that was open, not the search. That's all that is. Why misspellings keep typing it wrong over and over again when the answer populated the first time? I don't know. But it was happening at 6 o'clock, even according to the defense's own witness. So what argument do we have here? Why are we still holding on to the possibility or the thought that it happened at 2:27 when the defense's own expert witness said that that's not the case? I don't get it. I don't get it. Doesn't make sense to me. And why delete it? Like, a lot of people aren't, especially if they had nothing to do with the crime, they're not going to think all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to be part of a crime or this or that or whatever. Maybe people clear their history and stuff. I don't know why she cleared it. If she did, I didn't, I haven't gotten that far. Maybe she did. Maybe when I'm going through the defensive stuff, we'll bring it up and we'll talk about that. Why did she delete that? When did she delete that? All 9 yards. If she deleted it, I really don't know. All righty. So at 6:30 a.m., Brian Higgins is woken up by phone calls from Canton Police Chief Ken Barakowitz and Brian Albert. The call from Barakowitz was ignored, but he did answer the Albert call, who tells him the situation. Higgins gets dressed, drives to 34 Fairview Road. McCabe goes into Brian and Nicole Albert's home to wake them and tell them O'Keefe was found on their lawn. Lank and Good interview McCabe and Brian and Nicole Albert inside the house before going back to the Canton Police Department. Now, I know Proctor didn't go into the house. He wasn't even there that first day. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, he didn't even go in and check, blah, 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 blah. I mean, by that point, he could have, things would have been cleaned up, the whole 9 yards. But these officers went into the house that night. Interesting. Yeah, but Harris, we went through it. The state's own defense witness said that that's what time that the tab was open. It wasn't when the thing was searched. So I don't understand why we're still on that. All right, let's continue. O'Keefe is taken away in an ambulance to Good Samaritan Hospital. Carrie Roberts begins to drive Reed to the hospital, but turns around and brings her back right after the call from Reed's mother, who has requested Reed to be involuntarily hospitalized. Okay. 6:38 a.m., the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit with Norfolk District Attorney's Office is notified of the incident. 6:44 a.m., Sergeant Boganek, the supervisor on call, receives a call letting him know that a body was found in the snowbank in a Canton, and state police detectives are required. 6:47 a.m., O'Keefe arrives at Good Samaritan Hospital in an ambulance. He is hypothermic and body temperature of 80.1 degrees and is in cardiac arrest. 6:48, Buchanan calls Trooper Michael Proctor to let him know that a man was found in the snow outside of the home in Canton. He tells Proctor it might be a medical incident. 7 a.m., Buchanan calls State Police Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully and lets him know about O'Keefe's death. Now, apparently, Brian Tully and Paul O'Keefe, which is John O'Keefe's brother, played football together back in school, a long time ago. And because they played in school together, they thought that was one of the reasons of the cover up. It sounds like a lot of people know a lot of people in this town. Doesn't sound like a very large town. You know what I'm saying? So to think that people aren't going to know each other, especially first responders or people that are employed by the municipality that they live in or the nearby municipality, and have to work closely with such departments and things of that nature. Sounds like Brian Higgins, ATF, he knows this police officer there. They know guys that are in the troopers and 9 yards. So to to see something where everybody kind of knows everybody a little bit or familiar with everyone that are in a similar profession of first responders or investigators. I mean, come on now. If you thought that they weren't going to know anybody or they weren't going to have some familiarity with each other, I think you're fooling yourself. I really do. I don't think I think your expectation might be a little bit too high for that. All righty. So, um, Tilly speaks to Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz and District Attorney Michael Morsery, and they decide that the Canton Police Department will recuse itself from the investigation. 7 to 7:15 a.m., Brian Higgins arrives at 34 Fairview Road. So it was a good time by the time they called him and he takes off for him to get there. Testified that he stayed for less than an hour before leaving and going to the Canton Police Department. He leaves the station after 5 p.m., according to access logs, but denies that he was there the whole day, saying he may have left and come back. What are people thinking, that he went in there and he was like, all right, Canton Police Department, I'm going to let all you law enforcement detectives and everybody know here, we took this guy's life. We need to blame his girlfriend, in hopes that everybody's just going to fall in line. Nobody's going to be like, yo, we can't do this. I'm going to arrest you. I'm going to contact the higher authorities. We're going to do. That's crazy. I mean, but again, some of the conspiracy theories are kind of wild, to be honest with you. All righty. So he leaves there, and I think he leaves there before the car gets there. All righty. 7:50 a.m. Keith is pronounced deceased. 7:51 a.m. Reed arrives at Good Samaritan Hospital in an ambulance. 8:30 a.m. Julie Albert arrives at 34 Fairview Road to drop off Dunkin' Donuts for Brian Albert Jr. and learns that O'Keefe has passed. 9 a.m. Jennifer McCabe calls Lank and asks him to return to 34 Fairview Road. Lank and Lieutenant Paul Gallagher return to interview McCabe. She tells them she heard Reed say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Now, again, the defense is going to argue that she said, did I hit him? And did I, instead of, I hit him. But even if the statement of did I leads me to believe that's an odd, suspicious statement to make. I know I made it at the top of the show that, in my law enforcement career, if I walked into, a situation and somebody said, I didn't do it, I didn't, take somebody's money, I didn't hit that person, I didn't do this, or, could I have done this? Could I have done that? Those are usually indications that those are usually like guilty statements, to be honest with you, of somebody who is somewhat admitting fault, so to speak. So at 9:03 a.m., blood tests are ordered for Reed to test for alcohol and recreational drugs. Her blood is drawn at 9:08 a.m. and arrives in the lab 5 minutes later. 9:53 a.m., the test comes back to show 93 milligrams per deciliter of alcohol in her system. That's like 0.08. I mean, that's the drunk limit. And so she dropped him off at 12:50 something, right? I think it's like a couple. How many points does it go down every hour? I don't know. This probably means 93 at that time. That's 0.79, 0.8, or 0.079, 0.08. That's like right around the limit for alcohol. So 9 hours before. So she's probably double. 0.19, 0.22, somewhere around there, around the time that around the time that John O'Keefe found himself on the yard there, whether you believe it was because of the accident or the murder that Kieran Reed is accused of, or if you think that the conspiracy that somebody ended up taking his life, his body and his phone did not move at 12:25. So to go from 12:25 to 9:03 a.m., it's 9 hours. I mean, yeah, it's definitely double, if not maybe even a little bit more, to be honest with you. But so she was highly intoxicated during that time. She was blackout drunk when she hit him. She could have been very drunk and didn't understand what she did. That's a possibility. Let's see. At 10 a.m., um, Buckneck, forgot how to pronounce it, and Proctor arrive at Canton Police Department and speak to Canton officers to get information about the case. After being filled in, they go to the hospital to interview the first responders, observe O'Keefe's body, and collect his clothing as evidence. Then go to Jennifer and Matt McCabe's home to interview them. During the interview, Brian Albert arrives and is also interviewed. Now, I think that there was some sort of family familiarity between Proctor and the Alberts. Just as the Canton Police Department recused themselves, I think that Proctor should have done the same. I think that, like I said, I'm straightforward. I'm going to be straightforward. I think he should have, recused himself. I think that his actions and his investigation could very well jeopardize this case against Karen Reed. That's just the God honest truth. His actions, what he did, he didn't recuse himself. That is, he's playing with hot water. Doesn't necessarily mean that, he was involved in some sort of cover up or anything like that. But it does leave that as a possibility to be open. I mean, it's for interpretation of the person that's, looking at the evidence. But his actions were pretty bad. I'm sure, you can't deny it. What I do think though is the prosecution probably needs to get Proctor on the stand right away. First thing up, get him out of the way and get it out of the way. Get all the stuff out of the way so that way you can focus in on the evidence, right? Because the way they did it last time, I believe he was one of the last persons to hit the stand. And then shortly after that, I believe the defense pulled their case. So the last thing that the jury kind of heard from the prosecution was the defense's cross-examination and tongue lashing that they gave Proctor. They beat him up on the stand, and rightfully so. I mean, he did a lot of bad stuff. So it is what it is. What's up, Mr. Beer, coming in, becoming a new YouTube member. Thank you so much, Mr. Beer. We appreciate you. All righty. So let's see. 10:41 a.m. Burknick calls the state medical examiner's office and says O'Keefe may have been involved in a physical altercation. So they see that's the other thing too. Initially, the ME didn't say that this was a vehicular accident. This was a physical altercation, which when you look at the injuries, you have a wound to the back of the head. You're being told that this is a potential vehicle versus pedestrian, and you have some damage or some injuries to the right side of the body only, which would somewhat be a little bit indicating of a side swipe and maybe not a definitive impact. The ground was frozen. It had been very cold. It was in late January in Massachusetts. I can't imagine that it been 80 degrees anytime soon there, so, him hitting his head. I personally think he hit his head on the car, if not once, but twice, but that's just my belief. I think he hit it on the side as he got sideswiped. But you typically are looking for bruising. You're looking for road rash and a bunch of other things, but he did land in the snow and on the hard ground, right? So you would still expect to see some, bruising, but there isn't. There's some bruising on his hand, which again I have not seen any recreation. I've seen some of the guys that are in the Discord. They've sent me testimony of when the crime scene recreator was up to the expert and how he was, what he was talking about, but they didn't really actually show all right, the vehicle turned this way, the vehicle was traveling at this rate of speed. It would have, this is what it would have been or what it would have done. I got nothing out of it outside of it sounded like maybe perhaps a side swipe, which is what I had told, everybody in the Discord already. I didn't want, and I still haven't listened to like any testimony about how one side or another thinks it happened. And I personally think that he probably got sideswiped, being so close to the the curve there. And then I asked in the Discord, was there any clothing found near the curve, such as a shoe or something like that? Because if that ends up being the case, that's going to tell you more or less if he was knocked out of his shoe, where it happened, things of that nature. And yeah, all those things were prevalent there. And so you would expect to see those things in a vehicular pedestrian accident. The lack of bruising is the one thing that's kind of weird. I know a lot of people think that a dog committed, bit the arm, and that the bruising was a defensive move, which was weird because a lot of people were saying, all right, he had a bruise to his right hand. Let me move this real quick. He had a bruise to his right hand, and apparently people are saying, well, if you put your hands up like this, you'll see, where he may have been blocking, and that's where the defensive wound came from. But that's also the same arm that has all the dog bites, quote unquote. So was he like lifting the dog up in the air while blocking with one arm? Because there wasn't any bruising on the other arm. Now, when somebody puts their fists up like this, you would expect bruising also on the outer area of the hand on the left arm where the pinky and the ring are. But yet there's nothing there. So in order for us to believe that this was a dog attack, we would have to believe that this was an animal that left no DNA behind, was attacking his arm, and at the same time he had his arm up in a defensive mood, defensive manner, blocking punches. That's a hard sell. That's a hard sell. The dog came in the second half of the fight, but without, what do you have, like a condom on his mouth or something that he didn't leave DNA? Like, I get it, but like, all righty, so he blocked, and then after he got blocked, he got bit on his arm. I have a buddy of mine who's a homicide detective. Well, his position now, he's been promoted several times over. He's in a very high position, but he was a homicide detective for a very long time. And we were looking at the autopsy pictures. The eyes and the way that they look is a clear indication of brain damage. Getting hit in the back of the head, which you have the injury to the back of the head. In fact, I think the defense's own witness in trial stated that they didn't find anything that showed, him being struck this way. Now, I know that there was like a little cut in his eye or something like that, but outside of that cut, there was nothing that showed like force against his face going from his face to the back of his head, that it was the other direction. And so I don't think there was a fight. There was no sign of a fight on the front of his face. I mean, if you have the eyelid, and if a tail light shatters, that's another reason why the eyelid would be cut, is it's plastic that hits you. So just kind of, like I said, things that I looked at. So expert witness Trooper Paul stated Officer O'Keefe's arm was bent at a 90-degree angle. Lexus hit him, made O'Keefe spin and project him 30 feet in the air. So I also said that there was that possibility that his hand got hit from the vehicle, and that sucked him in, and he's got sideswiped. But to me, in order for him to land where he landed, I think that the vehicle would have had to have gone sort of in the middle of the street and then swerved to have hit him towards the or sideswipe him, forcing him towards or onto the lawn. Right? It's not necessarily that she just went sideswipe him like that, like a top, and he spun like that. Now, I strongly believe that if she did commit this crime, he probably yelled something at her. I mean, obviously they were angry. She left him voicemail saying, I effing this or blanking that, or whatever the case may have been. So obviously they didn't leave in a good terms there, right? She didn't stay there. His body was found quite a bit of a distance away. We'll discuss this later, but her vehicle was shown to have been going 24 miles per hour in reverse. And, is it possible that she went down the street, and he yelled something at her, because they're angry, they're upset. She backs up. hits the gas. She's drunk, obviously. I mean, she was still a point 0.8 at the time of that she arrived at the hospital and had her blood drawn at 9 a.m. I think it's highly possible and plausible that she may have gone back, try to not necessarily swerve to hit him, but maneuver the vehicle so she could be close to him at the window and hit him. It could have been unintentional. To me, if there was a swerve, that also can prove intent. If she did swerve to hit him, that can prove intent, and that can be a reason for the murder charge. Right? Because up to this point, I mean, you've had the arguments and things of that nature, but you haven't really had anything that shows intent. Now, if you can say that, hey, it would make sense if he got sideswiped and he, hit the vehicle, which we're going to look at the car. There's some interesting scratches on the side of the car, some really interesting scratches that go along the side. And then you have where the head hit, where you have hair also on the side of the SUV. Yeah, you have some really interesting stuff because those scratches also, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, maybe that came from John O'Keefe's car. Those are some pretty long scratches down the side. So it's not short. It's not like a boom and then, oh, okay, yeah, 2 mile per hour, barely touch, then go. No, these are some pretty gnarly scratches that I saw on the side of this SUV. All righty. At 1:19, Proctor calls Reed from his personal cell phone. 1:27, Reed makes a Google search for DUI lawyers. So at the time, you can tell by this that at the time, the thought was this was a DUI accident, that there wasn't intent. They weren't going in at this was like, oh, hey, she tried to murder him or anything like that. She's searching for DUI lawyers. So, putting 2 and 2 together, probably told her, hey, you may need to lawyer up and get a DUI lawyer. Again, which is something that's not consistent with somebody trying to frame someone. You know what I mean? But he does make some, and again, this is the first day. He does an investigation. He says some things later, calls her a whack job, and says that he wishes that she would just pass away by her own hand, things of that nature. And we're going to discuss those things. But this is day 1, so he hasn't really met her, hasn't really spoken to her, just kind of informing things, saying, hey, you're intoxicated. This is what's going on. I wouldn't be surprised if he said, hey, you may want to speak to an attorney. But that's going to be a good stopping point that we're going to be stopping at. Let's see. If you guys have any, all right, hold on. Let's see. McCabe pronounced his name Buka. I don't even know. I know what that is, Mr. and Miss Linda Lane. That's funny. All right, let's see. He said many vile things. Yeah, he did. But does that necessarily mean that she didn't do anything either? You know what I mean? Like 2 things can be right at the same time. You can have somebody who's investigating the case improperly. You can have somebody who's trying to maybe perhaps not shine light on a law enforcement officer in efforts to not put the officer in the limelight, so to speak, because they truly believe that there was, it's an open shut case, and they don't want to create more hardship for the officer and his family. And in doing so, created more hardship and more of a bigger, focal point and things of that nature onto them. In doing so, those things can be right, and she could have done it. Can be also right at the same time. You know what I mean? It could also be the other way around, where there was some sort of cover up. This department here, they were involved in I think there was a young lady who passed away. Detectives I'm going to say the Canton Police Department, which aren't the ones that investigated this case. It was different agency. A lot of the stuff was done at the Canton Police Department, but it wasn't them that investigated the Karen Reed case. But I believe it was the Canton detectives or something like that groomed some little girl, and she ended up getting pregnant, and um, they found her deceased. They ruled it a suicide. You know, the officers were wrong. They were not wrong. They were in the wrong. It ended up being the detectives. They ended up covering it up and making it look like she took her own life, and in reality it was them that took their life. And and so I understand the hesitancy in trusting law enforcement in that area because of that. But at the same time, you had a law enforcement agency investigate it, find what happened, and arrested the right people, right? A cover up can only last as long as it stays low profile and as long as it stays within the department. So if you have other agencies starting to investigate, or it becomes a high profile case, and then you have media attention and everything else that comes about it, if there was a cover up because of the other extensive law enforcement agencies that are looking into it, it would have been found and they would have been arrested. Now, it's kind of weird to say that the same agency that investigated the detectives that groomed, the young lady and ended up taking her alive would arrest those detectives that were involved there and then turn a blind eye to the Alberts and to everybody else that was involved in this case. They were all officers too. So I just don't see that being the situation. I understand that they were investigated. Some people were reprimanded for the things that they'd done. Some people were suspended. Some people are still waiting to figure out what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, they weren't arrested for anything. It was Proctor's, actions good? No, he probably shouldn't be a detective for the rest of his life. He's lost all credibility. Right? He can't investigate anything. He's probably going to be reprimanded to like a beat officer or school officer or something of that nature, where he's not going to be put in a situation to testify in court anymore. Now, obviously, the cases that he's investigated and those things, you can't go back and change those. So he would still testify to those if those ever came up in court. But when it comes to future cases and things of that nature, he's probably never going to see one. And so yeah, hold on. But yeah, so at the same time, I don't see why they wouldn't do that. I don't see why they would turn the blind eye to the Alberts, but not to the other detectives that were involved. Now, this is a multi-agent thing. I think it was the FBI who also did an investigation into Proctor, into Higgins, and into everybody else. And so once those things happen, and once you start looking into those things, and there's clues and evidence that point in a certain direction, it doesn't take very long or very hard to arrest somebody that actually committed the crime, especially if it's not a cold case. Now, if it's a cold case, that's a different story, right? A cold case, if something happened 10 years ago, you're going to have a hard time finding, ring camera evidence and a bunch of other things that are going on. But if it just happened within a couple of months or years, you might get lucky. Well, you more than might get lucky. You probably get, access to quite a bit of stuff that's saved, but we'll see. Let's see. So I'll see if I can answer a couple questions. Gone on a bit longer than I wanted to, but I hope everybody appreciates it. And please hit that like and subscribe. Okay, so she left drunk anger voicemails does not mean she wanted him dead. But like I mentioned, there's the behaviors before, after, and during, right? So there's a lot of incriminating behaviors based on just Karen Reed looking at those actions that she had before. There was upset, there's been turmoil, they've been fighting. She was, she was in other, at least fooling around in other with other people, Higgins being one of them. Being the one we know. I don't know if there was any others, but Higgins being the one that we know of. And during the time she's, her actions are still pretty troubling. She's intoxicated. She's driving. She's out at that time of night. She dropped him off. They're clearly still in a debate. Or heated argument. There's still a lot of those type of feelings of anger and things like that. And then afterwards too, oh, also during the time, also she's saying, "Did I hit him?" Let's just give her the benefit of the doubt that she said, "Did I hit him?" That's a troubling statement on its own. And then after the fact, we'll get into all of them. I had a conversation with a homicide detective, as I mentioned, and he said that when you look at those elements of before, during, and after, there's a lot of incriminating um, actions that she's making that would lead an investigator to believe that she did something. Dogs don't bite in radial directions. Let's see. See, that was the one thing that, and then we'll get into the injuries. We'll get into the injuries, but it does not look like a dog injuries to me. Let's see. Uh, Janet says, I watched the whole trial and I still think she did it. I'm leaning that way. I'll be honest with you, but we're going to go through the defensive stuff. I'm going to ask some people that are mods and members, if they would join for the defense's argument. So that way they can explain to me what the defense's argument and their point of view from that, because I can see something, but my point of view, it just may not click for me. And maybe for somebody else who is looking at it from a different point of view, might have a different insight, and it could explain to me what their insight is, and we can come to a conclusion based on that. Connor, I hope you join me. You're definitely one. The one thing the FBI did conclude was John wasn't hit by a car. Now, was that the FBI or an FBI investigator who was then hired by the defense, or whatever the case may be? Was that the FBI that investigated Proctor? Because that's different, right? That's different. And I don't know. I'd like to see the FBI saying that was the case. I haven't gotten to that part. I haven't seen that part, that the FBI said that, oh, we don't think it was a car that hit him. So I'd like to see that, because everything that I have seen are from the defense's side. They get some, doctors and pathologists, or some, they're experts on the body and the dog bites and stuff. It just seems that everybody they got came from southern places, right, where there's not a lot of snow. I think their main doctor was out of South California, and then practiced also in Africa for a period of time. And he stated that the snow in the area would have softened the impact. And which obviously, if you live in a cold area up north, I mean, even if you think Karen Reed didn't do it, you cannot say that the ground was softened by the colder conditions out there. That is bull crap, 100%. Let's see. Let's see. John did things too. Right. No, I understand that. And that's more of a reason why somebody might go out there and commit a crime like this. Typically when somebody passes, everybody always says it's the spouse, it's the boyfriend, the girlfriend. You have some turmoil, you have some accusations of infidelity. I mean, those are typically some of the things that set somebody off in a relationship when they decide to take it to the ultimate step and take somebody's life. It's usually because somebody's being shady, somebody's cheating, and they find out, So even if he did do something, that doesn't lend me to believe that he's, that, oh, okay, so the police did it. I don't connect those dots. The partner with the FBI, DOJ, etc., they worked for them, but were they the ones that investigated this crime? Or did they see pictures of the injuries and looked at the location on a picture of where things happened, and that's the bottom line of their expertise? Because that seemed to be what the defense's witness, all they had. They weren't even told that dog DNA wasn't found on his arms or anything. So don't forget what. Yeah. So like I said, even if John is out there doing things, he's the one that ended up, with his life passed. So it's not like he killed himself, right? Um, if somebody is, doing things, that's usually another like motivation, typically, especially in a case of a crime of in the heat of passion, so to speak. Let's see. Zero evidence she didn't hit him, and much proof. Well, I mean, his DNA was found on the side of the car, on his hair, on the side of the vehicle. It's I don't think so. I mean, I don't understand where these dots are connected, but we'll go through them. We'll look at it. Pig DNA was found, which could be from dog treats. But if the dog transferred the pig DNA, doesn't that mean that the dog would have had to have chewed the pig DNA? Like if you're thinking it's pig's ear or pig treats or whatever the case may have been, and if the animal chewed the whatever it was that had pig on it, and it was still valid at that time, so it must have recently ate it. It's not like they ate it like earlier or whatever. But isn't there usually, if something is chewing something and leaves that DNA behind, don't you think they would have also left their DNA behind? I don't see a situation where somebody or an animal can chew on something and leave a piece of particle of that item behind without leaving their own DNA being in its mouth, chewing it with its saliva, the whole nine yards. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, depends how fast they're going. It was a blizzard, right? So they're probably not driving fast. Like, blood and tissue gets stuck onto things. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all. But yeah, driving 80 miles and blizzard, those type of things, 100%. Yeah. Don't deny that that hair, DNA, those type of things would still be prevalent there. I've investigated a lot of pedestrian vehicle accidents, many of them, many fatality. So, yeah, I can tell you for a fact that DNA can stay on a vehicle or a piece of skull or scalp with hair. Hmm. Very much so. Treats were on the dog's teeth, or treats were on Dig's teeth. I'm assuming dog's teeth, and it left it in the shirt. Body was not tested. But even at that, if you're finding pig's DNA, regardless of where you find it or whatever the case may be, but even at that, I mean, if somebody's gonna bite through a shirt, there would be DNA through the shirt too. So I mean, it's just like I don't get where this like there's this connection with the animal. It just because they had one. In fact, I think they brought up a bite that dog had actually done, and it was a significantly larger wound on that lady's hand. My brother was bitten by a German Shepherd not too long ago, probably about like maybe 2-3 months now. An untrained one, right in the arm, and uh, go check it out on Discord. I'll put I put those pictures there if you guys want to check it out. It is on Discord. Those look like dog bites. There's meat, there's fat that is missing. There's You can clearly see the puncture wounds. You can see the shape of the jaw. There's literally none of that in any of the injuries to John O'Keefe's body. Plus, every wound is going in the same direction. There is a linear pattern to all the wounds. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never seen like a dog only attack in one direction. They have paws. I mean, everything, the paws, the teeth, the hesitancy bites where they're barely, I don't know how he's attacking him and barely, just barely nipping nipping the skin or whatever they said it was to only have left just the canines, which don't make sense because the canines are kind of further behind the front teeth of the animal. And so if the canines got into them, the front teeth would have also gotten into them. And yet you don't see that. There's none of that. There's no lower jaw mark either. Like there's absolutely nothing in there that says that that was from an animal. Nothing. I know there people are going to point at this one dude who had this dummy who had cracks on his arm, but even on that dummy, you can see the puncture wounds and the bite mark and the bite pattern. Now the cracks are from age. We had that same dummy that we used in my department. We beat it up in it was for practicing baton practice and qualifying. So you had to hit the dummy and the arms and stuff like that with a baton for X amount of time. And over the years, those cracks begin to develop because of the impact. You know, I would assume that a dog's mouth is probably impactful and will create those cracks in the arm, over time. Plus, that's a rubber arm, not a human arm. Like, come on now. It's not going to act the same. Let's see. I'm going to answer just maybe two more. Tail eye pieces were found in his shirt, 100%. Did the Lexus leave the pig DNA? But the thing is, I mean, how much pig DNA was there? And, did he come in contact with somebody maybe at one point who works at a slaughterhouse or whatever the case may be? Or maybe somebody that works at at the local grocery store packing things, maybe came in contact with bacon or something on their person. And there's a lot of ways and reasons that there could be pig DNA, but to say that it came from a dog's mouth, but yet there was no dog DNA around it is impossible. It's impossible. They did swab his arms. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten to that part. Let's see. Proctor had possession of John's clothes and tail light fragment. And so that's not uncommon. You would expect the lead detective to have that access. Like, I don't understand why that's suspicious. That just doesn't make any sense. Now, did you find Proctor's DNA on there? Now, if Proctor's DNA was also on the glass or inside the glass or mixed with the pig DNA, I mean, you got something. It just doesn't make any sense. They threw clothing and tail light pieces in same storage area. Yeah, that's where evidence is usually kept, in the same storage area. I'm not sure where the disconnect here is. There were 13 holes in a hooded sweatshirt, one cotton swab used. There was pig DNA, no samples taken from the arm. I don't know, but I mean, 13 holes and yet not one piece of dog saliva on any of the clothing. Come on now. Come on. John's DNA was found on the taillight housing. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not dog barks. I don't think so. Or bites, not barks. Apologies. The evidence collected was not collected, documented, or stored properly. His clothes sat in a bag in a cop's car. Melted snow would have affected the blood on wet clothes. I mean, I can bring in a CSI guy to argue all these things that you're saying. I mean, the evidence was not collected or documented or stored properly. Are you talking about because they put it in red Solo cups and these bags or whatever? Those things happen. I've talked about some stories where, we put evidence and things that we had access to, especially if there's conditions that are changing. Like, for instance, if snow is going to start to melt or whatever the case may have been, you got to document it. You got to take a picture of where it's at and where it's located and then collect it. Now, if they sanitize the red Solo cups and those type of things, I don't think there's an issue with it. It just kind of depends on that aspect of it. And that's if they're looking at DNA off of those pieces of glass or whatever the case may have been. But I don't understand why it was stored in a bag in a cop's car. Like, I know a lot of detectives and officers, including myself, that have done that. I don't get where the big conspiracy is here. Like you're looking at things you don't know. I'm assuming none of you guys are officers. And so when you look at things you don't understand, I don't know anything about surgery, but I would assume somebody getting cut open in the chest is pretty dangerous. And I would say, hey, you're going to kill him. To the doctor, they're going to be like, we do this every day. We know what we're doing. It may not seem right to you to open somebody's chest up because you don't understand or don't know, but this is to save his life or her life or whatever the case may be. And so that seems to be where a lot of the disconnect is, in my opinion, is that people are looking at this from the view of maybe CSI or Law and Order SVU or some of these other programs that are out there, that aren't real. Now, obviously, could they have been collected better? Yes. Evidence bags are bags that are used to store things. If there was a bloody knife, do you know where they store it in? In a cardboard box. And they strap it and they make sure it's secured so that the knife doesn't, this cardboard box has like these little holes in it, so you can put some zip ties through it. So that way you can zip tie the knife to the cardboard box. And then you seal it, then you put a sticker and you sign it. Now, I guess to the outside world, somebody's gonna be like, whoa, in a cardboard box? Why don't you put it in like a storage container that is free flying in the air so nothing touches it? Like one of those things you put on your desk, like that has the globe floating in the air and you can spin it. It doesn't exist. No. You don't trust the evidence because, not that he wasn't supposed to have it. So you at this, no offense, Connor, but at this point, you shouldn't trust any lead detective because they're in charge of the evidence. It doesn't connect the dot for me. I apologize. I was talking about this. Hold on. Where is it? Going to disappear. Use the grocery bag not sealed. Did they have evidence bags on their person? I mean, I know you would think that'd be obvious, but at the time they thought it was a vehicle accident or a medical thing in the morning, right? And then they started slowly kind of putting these pieces together. You got to think of the entire situation. There's a dog trainer that did an entire episode on John O'Keefe's arm being dog bites, and he has no skin in the game. Yeah, I already found him. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the dummy and how we utilize that dummy. The same ones we had in our department, and they had the same cracks, and it wasn't from dog bites. We didn't have a dog that attacked us. That was from baton hits over time. Those cracks develop. Plus, that arm isn't like a human arm either. And you could see the jaw outline of the dog bite. You can see the puncture wounds on those arms where the dogs attacked that rubber arm. You don't see those things. You don't see a lower jaw. You don't see the entire jaw or a jaw mark on his body. It just doesn't make any sense. And I mean, you have a couple of places where it's cut longer, right? Like one on the bicep and maybe one on the forearm, but majority of them are very, very close, like small cuts, which you would assume if a dog's biting you, you're pulling your arm away. And also every dog bite or paw mark, because they said there were both, they're all going in the same direction. Not one is going in an opposite direction or an up and down movement. You would assume that if a dog was, on your person and biting you, they would also be, clawing and using their arms. German Shepherds are big dogs. I've had some canine. I've had a canine officer look at it, and I've had my homicide detective friend look at it, and Not one say it's a dog. It's not a dog. That's a far-fetched thing. But I've gone over 2 hours now. That's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I appreciate everybody that is tuned in. We'll be back probably Thursday night to finish up the timeline. Then we'll get into all the other stuff. Hit that like, subscribe, be civil with everybody. Nobody has to agree with you. And you nor I know everything. Don't know everything. So let's try to act like that's the case. Because the moment that you think you do know everything, that just kind of tells you about how much you really don't know. So with that being said, you guys have a safe night. Peace out.